Every 88 minutes, a woman in Idaho becomes a victim of domestic violence, according to statistics from Idaho State Police in 2011. Domestic abuse is a problem. Idaho citizens can do more to help those who have and are being abused. As a past witness to a brutal domestic relationship, if I would have known these facts, I would have spoke up about it to the police. Violent domestic relationships are unhealthy and can end in death. Spreading awareness is important in Idaho because it's such a rural part of the country that victims can feel alone or the abuser can think that they can get away with it more. Domestic violence affects children in these homes, which can lead to psychological impairment. If you or a loved one are suffering from domestic violence, please understand that you're not alone and that there is a way out. According to the Idaho Coalition Against Sexual and Domestic Violence, it is a pattern of abusive behavior in a relationship used by one partner to gain or maintain power and control over the other partner. Domestic violence can be actions or threats of actions that influence or control another person's behavior and decisions that are meant to intimidate, humiliate, frighten, coerce, blame, or injure. Most of the time, the media emphasizes physical abuse when it can be emotional as well. The U.S. Department of Justice says 1 in 4 women will be a victim of domestic violence in their lifetimes. Every day in the U.S., more than 3 women are murdered by their husbands or boyfriends. Idaho is no exception. 18 people have died because of domestic violence in 2011 in Idaho alone. In a rural part of northern Idaho, a man who police say stabbed to death his 27-year-old pregnant wife was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. The police say the couple's 20-month-old was also there, but she was not harmed. Evidently, there was a reported dispute prior to the homicide, according to records in idvsa.org. I can't help but think that if a family member or a loved one would have reached out when they had the dispute, she might still be living if someone would have just helped her out. And it's not just the wife, but children can also be involved as well. 4 out of 5 children go home to a safe and loving home. Exposure to domestic violence can have a profound effect on children, making them more prone to emotional problems like depression and anxiety, and increasing the chances that they will either become victims of violence themselves or commit crimes later in their life. What happens in early childhood can impact a child for their whole lives. Now, because it is a sensitive issue, it may not be a subject that you want to bring up with a loved one. But if they really are a dear and loving person to you, then you will want to see them safe. Idaho has placed laws for victims' rights and organizations for support that we all should be aware of. According to the Council on Domestic Violence and Victim Assistance, if there is a threat of further violence by a family or household member, you may file for a civil suit order at the county courthouse. They are issued on emergency basis and there's no fee. They're mostly known as restraining orders. And then the Idaho Council on Domestic Violence and Victim Assistance, they also have events to raise awareness for it, and they also have intervention programs. And intervention programs where a psychologist or a mediator comes into your home and you talk with the abuser. The family discusses, what they think is wrong with the person, but they do it in a loving manner so that the abuser understands that it's not right, but that they are loved as well. Also, Resilient Families Idaho, they have trained counselors and advocates that provide trauma-informed, developmentally sensitive parent-child services to promote resiliency and thriving, lifelong, healthy relationships. This is a really great organization, and if you have been a victim and you have a child, you guys can go there and work on developing your relationship. And then also, if you can call the National Domestic Hotline or the Idaho Domestic Hotline. They have hotlines as well, 1-800-669-3176. If you must know, then of course if you're in immediate danger, call 911. But any household member who is committing a battery is guilty of a felony that is punishable by imprisonment in the state prison for a term not to exceed 10 years or a fine not to exceed $10,000. Now if you think about that, that's huge. And a battery is just, when you inflict harm on someone, and if you think someone is inflicting harm on you, it really is a serious thing that shouldn't be taken lightly. So it's really important. And then if you want to look further details, you can look up Idaho Code 18-918. Now that you are informed about the laws and organizations to help domestic abuse situations, it's really important to tell others about this. If we all help one another, support one another, and stand up for what is right, Idaho can be a safe place for families and their children. It would be a world where children wouldn't be afraid to go home after school, where spouses would look forward to going home after work, and a place where fear won't be a normal emotion when waking up in the morning. As you've heard, violent domestic relationships are unhealthy and can ultimately lead to death. With Idaho being a rural state, awareness is important to save those whose home is miles from help. Not only that, but domestic violence affects children in these homes, which can lead to psychological impairment. So domestic abuse is not something to ignore about. Idaho citizens can do more to help. And by taking initiative and telling someone, that can really help. And when you help someone or yourself, just know that they will never be hurt again. And by helping your loved ones or coming out with your own abuse, you are helping make Idaho a safer place for yourself, for others, and ultimately for your children.
Good job, girls.